has anyone like have never like used JavaScript before, or just kind of, so everyone has like, okay, don't be afraid, it's okay. All right, Dan, can we start? I think you just probably want to turn that on, right?
I just turn it on.
It's going? Okay.
We
All
are
right.
live from New York.
Yeah.
Keep turning the hand.
Thank you, guys. I'm Tom Goldenberg. I'm currently a software engineer at Agolo. We're a small startup. I'll talk a little bit more about them later. And I'm going to give basically what you can expect tonight. I'm going to give kind of an overview of the tutorial that me and my partner made on building apps with React Native. I'm going to give a live demonstration on how you can get started building apps with React Native, and that's about it. So first, a little bit about me. As I said, Agolo, we are a machine learning and natural language processing company. Basically what we do is we aggregate hundreds of thousands of news articles daily. We cluster them using machine learning, and then we summarize them into bullet point summaries. And that sounds really fancy and amazing. I provide the front end for that. So we have a team of machine learning engineers and natural language processing engineers, and I'm the person that puts everything on the screen. So that's what I do at Agolo. I graduated from Dev Bootcamp a year ago. Since then, I've been very involved in the JavaScript community in New York. One of the meetups I've been involved with is Meteor NY. Meteor is a JavaScript framework. We use Meteor at Agolo, and I've given lots of talks on Meteor and at their meetup. I organize React Native NYC. It's a meetup specifically geared towards React Native, and we had our last meetup at American Express. We've given meetups at eBay, Oscar Health. So I'm very much involved with the React Native community here. I blog a lot on Medium about React Native, about React, Meteor, just kind of like dev life, and of course Dev Bootcamp. I graduated. This is a cohort that I graduated with, the Dragonflies 2015, and it was a great experience. I learned so much here, and guys that are in the program take advantage of it. Yeah. So, and also if people are curious about Dev Bootcamp, feel free. Marie is in the back, and Dan is an instructor here, and they can answer any questions you guys have about the program. Cool. So, first thing I want to tell you a little bit about the tutorial that I made. So it's at buildreactnative.com. It's been out for about 2 months now, and basically, when I got out of bootcamp here, I did some contracting work. I got asked to join a startup using React Native at a time when it wasn't really that popular or really used by a lot of large companies. And what we saw was that there wasn't a lot of resources. There wasn't great documentation. I mean, some people, maybe you would say that still now, I'm not sure. And so we built this tutorial. It's essentially goes step by step building a complex app. So you're not building like a chat app, you're not building a like Hacker News clone, you build a Meetup clone. So it has like maps integration, calendar functionality, chat as well, events, all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty complex, and through a dozen or so chapters, we take you through the steps of building the app, including deploying it. So the authors of the tutorial are myself and Nick Brown, who I partnered with. He is a senior product manager at Huge, which is they do a lot of consulting work in New York City, a lot of big clients. And so he gets to work as like a designer and product manager for a lot of these apps that come out. So Nick really provided kind of the direction on the design, so like it looks really nice because I am horrible at design. And I provided a lot of the code for the tutorial. Why did I build a tutorial? Why did we do this? So Nick and I, we met at a meetup. We were really excited about React Native. I was using React Native, as I said, in a startup at my job at the time. And we're like, why don't we like come up with some product that we can make on the side, and like it'll be fun. So I used to teach Sanskrit, and so I had this idea of like making my own translation of the Bhagavad Gita. And we looked at the apps of the Bhagavad Gita on the App Store, and they were all atrociously designed. So we're like, yeah, let's do that. It's pretty simple. You don't need like any API calls. It's like pretty straightforward. And so we did that together. But in the process of building this app, we found that there were a lot of unanswered questions. Like React Native was awesome. You can do so much with it, but there are certain edge cases that you run into that the documentation doesn't really provide you like with help for. So like, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita app, you'd start and you have like a verse of the day, and we'd want it to like click that verse, go to a list view, and then scroll to that verse. It doesn't sound that complicated. And if you're designing for the web, you can, the DOM has kind of a good API for doing that. But we found in mobile that was really hard, and so that's one of the reasons why we formed the meetup together, so we can have this community where we can share similar problems like that. So yeah, 10 months we like kind of worked on this project on the side, finally released it in September, gotten good feedback, have kind of a couple hundred people that are using it, and a lot more that are using the free content, and we've gotten generally like good feedback from the community. The actual app is in the App Store, so you can actually like try out the sample meetup app. It's all open source as well, and we've had like dozens of contributors to that as well. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, I know a couple of people here have not used React. Is that correct? Can you just, for a show of hands, not used React, but have used some JavaScript before, right? Yeah, so I want to give kind of very quickly like why React, right? Like why a JavaScript framework, if we want to call it that. Why not just HTML? Or why not just HTML jQuery? So 3 things, and this is my interpretation of React and why I like it, but it's component based, it's object oriented, and it's imperative, not declarative. And I'm going to explain kind of what that means to me. First thing is like component based. So normally like if you work with a designer, you work on a team, you have like, what is a web app? It's a bunch of web pages. And a web page can be it's verbose, it's very big. You can have like hundreds of lines of HTML. And like let's say you want to reuse some of that HTML. If you're just using HTML, you have another page with HTML. So React is component based in that instead of just one page of HTML, you have a post, and the post has a post form, and you have a comments component. And so you can reuse these components all throughout your app, and it's really cool for designers because they can just, if they want to modify something or other, whether it's copy or design on just like one component, that change will happen throughout your entire app, even if it's like hundreds of web pages. So that's like, this is not specific to React at all. Like just about any JavaScript framework does this, any kind of like templating engine, but it is one of the core things that it's built around. Number 2 is a cool thing about React is it's object oriented. So these components, they act like objects. So like in Ruby, we learn about OO, right? JavaScript has OO too. JavaScript has support for classes now. And so, in your constructor, you can put any kind of state there, and you can reference that state. And so in your HTML, down here, div this state name, if you make any change to this state name, that HTML is automatically going to change. So like everything is really kind of like held together by that one object. So that's very cool. And the last one, this is like, these words are thrown around a lot, but imperative versus declarative. So like when we learn jQuery, jQuery is an imperative way of manipulating your user interface. You're manipulating the DOM. You're saying, I want that class or that ID, that element, I want to change it. React is different, and then it's declarative. You're declaring, this is my state, and you're going to render that state. And any change to the state, that element is wired to react to it. Just react, right? So the benefits to that, like if it's just one thing that's changing, okay, yeah, you can use jQuery, but like what about when you have many things that are changing? Like say you're selling t-shirts and you have different colors of the t-shirt, you have different sizes, you have different designs. You're going to keep track of all those variations, and if you keep them centrally in a state, it becomes very easy to reason about each scene in your web page. So those are 3 things about React, why I think it's cool. So that's React. React, like when we say React, it's like we mean the web, developing for the web. But React actually like applies. It's become much more universal. So React Native, taking the same concept, the same library in fact, and applying it to mobile UI elements, right? So React for the web, you have React DOM. You're using your div tags, your p tags, your h1, your h4. Those are UI elements. We're just modifying it to use native UI elements for mobile apps. So on Android and iOS you have your UI view. So we use view in the same way that we use div. We use a text UI element instead of like a p tag or an h1 tag. And like, why is this so great? It's really cool because previously the only alternative to something like this was to use HTML5 or to use a mobile responsive web app or a mobile HTML web app. And for a time, like, people thought that would be the answer. Like even Amazon, a lot of their app is built on this kind of technique of writing HTML, converting it into a mobile view and having that as your app. But what people realize that there's pretty severe shortcomings to that. And the shortcomings namely are that the responsiveness is not native. One, it's not native. It's not, it's just kind of doing some transfiguration to HTML. The animations weren't as smooth. You get a lot of shortcomings that after years of people experimenting are like, okay, it's not good enough for us. And so React Native comes in and it says, okay, we're going to use JavaScript. We're going to present this component-based system for rendering views. And you get to use it on iOS and Android, and you get the native look and feel, the slickness of the animations, all that kind of stuff. And that's really powerful. And I've written about this like as an organizer of React Native NYC, the meetup. I get approached by a lot of startup founders, a lot of like mid-sized companies, even sometimes some larger companies are interested, they want to know more. And basically it's like it would be foolish to start a company now and not to consider this. Because the market is not one-sided, especially in like distribution-based startups. You need to get your iOS app and you need an Android app. And so what are you going to do? You're going to have a team that works on your Android app and a team that works in Swift for your iOS app, or you're going to look at this new technology that possibly can give you the same result and have a faster build cycle to getting it out to your customers. It allows you to iterate faster and make improvements to your product, and those changes happen in one code base and not two. So that's why it's very powerful. That's why we're seeing the rise of its use over the past year or so. So also, before we go into like the live coding of how you can actually get started with React Native, ES6 is ECMAScript, which is like the formal name of JavaScript. This can be something that's like off-putting to people that are like learn JavaScript through like Code Academy or something like that. You're used to like var equals. You see a lot of new syntax. Don't be afraid. There's a lot of stuff online that can help you understand this stuff. But especially when you go into React Native, you go into React, you're going to see this a lot. And it's going to be a little confusing, but these 4 things really, if you kind of get enough, so like, oh, I know what that is, can really help. So one is destructuring. What this means is that if you encapsulate in the curly brackets like that, so it says let children equals this props, what that translated into traditional JavaScript would be var children equals this props children. So it just kind of reduces the verb, makes it less verbose. And so you see in the JavaScript community that, can you guys see that, by the way? I know it's not that great. It basically makes the code less verbose, and so a lot of developers prefer to like write code in this way. The thing on the right, this fat arrow function is a way of writing functions. The cool thing about the fat arrow is that it continues the whatever this refers to. And I'm sure you guys know, if you've played around with JavaScript, that like it's a big thing. If you're in a function, this means something. Then when you're out of the function, well, if you do a function with the fat arrow, this remains the same. It continues from outside of that function, and so that reduces some of like confusing things. And the one on the far right, import, export. So that's just a way that we refer to different functions or objects instead of traditionally in JavaScript you do var card equals require, and then you put the name of the file that you're referring to. So you see that a lot. And the last one that can be confusing, the spread operator. It basically allows you to extend either arrays or objects. So if like this state is an object, ... this state, you're extending it with something else. Here it's name. So I don't expect you guys, like that's just a very brief overview, and you don't have to like, maybe it piques some curiosity to go home and be like, oh, I want to go in the node console and kind of play around with some of this stuff. But it's just kind of a heads up, so like, wait a second, this is not how I learned JavaScript. And coding demo. How does that sound? Let's see how to do it? All right. Okay. I'm gonna bear with me because I'm sure that some mistake will happen or I'll get lost. But I'm gonna, I wrote these chapters, so I should know what I'm doing. So this is actually this is the website on the right, buildreactnative.com. I'm going to go through the first couple chapters that show how to get up and started and how to build like your first views with navigation and everything like that. The way the book works, the first couple chapters are free, and then there's like paid chapters such as building a chat system, building an API, deploying the API, deploying to the App Store, etc. So. All right, we're gonna start getting started. And I'm here in just a regular folder. I have a couple files in here, but we don't have to worry about that now. So basic requirements, to build apps for iOS, you need to have a Mac, right? I'm sure someone has some kind of like way of getting around that, but like in generally you wanna build iOS apps with Xcode and a Mac. So you're going to need like the version of Xcode, the latest version of Xcode. You're going to want to install React Native CLI, and that's the command line tool for getting you started building a new React Native app. Now, this is all going to be recorded, so some of you, if you guys want to try to code along, feel free, but I'm going to try to go pretty fast. So there will be a recording later. So I already have that. I have Xcode. I have this package, React Native CLI. And so I'm just going to go create a new React Native project. And let me get this started because this sometimes takes a while. So React Native. Can you see the code that I'm writing? Should I make it bigger or?
Bigger.
Make it a little bigger.
Let's see. How's that? Oops. There we go. Okay. All right. So that's going to do a lot of stuff. The command line tool is just going to get you started with everything you need to run the app on Xcode, run it on your Android device, etc. Once that's done, I'll go through kind of the structure of what it does. Here on the right, you can see kind of like the folder structure of what that's going to create. So it's going to create your app. The folders Android and iOS are going to have native files for those systems. So you're probably not going to be touching those folders very much. Node modules. Are you guys familiar with node modules, how NPM works? So node modules are where your dependencies go. So like React is a JavaScript library. We download it through NPM. So that will be stored in node modules. That, you know, besides the dot files like flow, buck, get, ignore, the two main files you're going to want to pay attention to are the two index files. So index.android.js is your entry file for building an Android app. Index.ios.js is going to be your entry file for building an iOS app. Package.json is going to be where you store your dependency, the list of your dependencies. Cool, so let's open that up. And you can see it says what packages were installed. It gives you instructions on how to run it. So let's see. I'm gonna open up in Atom. Oh wait, that's odd. Apparently I don't have Atom. What did I tell you guys? So if I open Atom, it works? That's weird. So I want to cd into the directory, and then I want to open that up in Atom. And okay. Cool. So yeah, like I said, you see the Android folder, you see the iOS folder, your node modules, package.json has your dependencies. Right now there's just React Native. Great, pretty straightforward. And to run it, I'm going to open the Xcode project, that extension file, and it gives you instructions when you install it. You know, run it by doing this. That's going to open it up in Xcode. How many of you guys have used Xcode before? Anyone? It's pretty crazy, right? It's like you want to try to spend as little time as possible there. I think they put so much work. I'm sure some people love it, but when you're just getting started, you just want to be able to code and see stuff happen, and Xcode can be very confusing if you're not experienced with it. So what happened is when I actually hit Command R, which runs the app, and that is really, really big.
Scale.
Comparison. Yeah. Maybe smaller. Yeah. Okay. So I hit Command R, which tells Xcode to run your app. And React is configured so that when you run it, it's going to start a JavaScript server in the background. So that's what you see here, this React packager. this is how you're converting, you're coding in JavaScript. It's converting the elements that you're writing into, the native UI elements. So that's why you have a server when you're developing locally. Once you want to actually push to the App Store, there's a whole bundling process that will, transpile your code into native code, and then you push it up just like any other Swift or Swift app or anything like that.
Does it get transpiled into Objective-C or into Swift?
That's a good question. I believe Objective-C, but don't quote me on that. So, okay, cool. We have that. So now you see I have the iPhone simulator running. Where's that coming from? So if I go here, and let's see if I can you guys see okay? Is it not clear? No?
Can you change the theme?
Can you make it bigger?
Yeah, I can make it. It's also the light, right? I think Dan is gonna. Oh, that's much better, right? You guys can see that okay? Okay. Cool. So those who have used React before, like, oh hey, we're using the same React, right? You're rendering the same way. It's just that these elements here come from React Native. So it's class assemblies, extends the component, the React component, and here we have view and text, just like, and for the web, for HTML, it would be div and p tag or whatever. Here we just have view and text. So there are a couple cool things I like to point out. So if I go to the simulator, there's some pretty awesome debugging options. So like coding for the web is really cool because of the Chrome inspector. Honestly, like there's so many cool things you can do with it. So we can actually make use of that. We can debug our code here. Let me make this way. Yeah, console. So yeah, if I add here something, and I can debug whatever I'm working on. So, and if I refresh, I DBC, right? What if I put this? What do you guys think that would do? Anyone? So this is the actual component. This is what I mean when I said it's very object oriented. So I have access to this whole class, all its methods, or all the state that it has. Another cool thing about React Native, hot reloading. This is amazing. So it's gonna start, I believe it uses Webpack in the background, but essentially it's able to live update whatever I code. And that's pretty powerful. It definitely makes for like a really enjoyable development experience. So let me just change this text, and as soon as I hit save, it's just gonna change. So like styling components is like wonderful. It's just a great experience that like once you have that, it's like, oh, it speeds up your development time so much. So that's cool. I'm gonna turn that off because we're gonna be doing a lot of coding. Let's see, and I'm gonna stop this. All right. So what's next? So we did that. We ran our app. We got this. We played around with it a little bit. Debugging, hot loading, adding packages is just like any other kind of JavaScript project. You use npm. Now all the cool kids are using Yarn. How many of you guys have heard of Yarn? It's just a replacement for npm. If you have a lot of dependencies, it makes, and you're like constantly sending off deployment stuff, it can speed up your process. So I'm actually going to use Yarn since like it's faster. But yeah,
Cool kid?
What's that?
Since you're a cool kid?
Yeah, I strive to be. Yeah.
Is it the same? So I didn't know whether I'd heard of it or not, There's a Yarn that's the operating system for Hadoop. Is it the same thing?
No, it's
Or
confusing.
Just a different name?
Yeah. So the website is at yarnpkg.com. So it's like Yarn package, but the npm name for it is Yarn. So if I it can be confusing because like if you're in a VM and you're using Ubuntu, like it thinks Yarn is something else. But anyways, so I'll do npm install for this one, I guess. So yeah, any kind of project you want at this moment is a date time formatting library. We can use it. So we have access to kind of any JavaScript library that's not specifically tied to HTML. We can use here, which is great. So that's adding packages. In the tutorial, I recommend that you set up a Git repository and all that kind of stuff, but we're not going to do that here. So congratulations, you just finished chapter 2. All right, so next we come to Navigator. I actually have a slide for this. Where is it? Yeah, Jean-Luc Picard. Yeah. So navigation in React Native is kind of a tricky subject. When it first came out, there was 2 different APIs for navigation. Now there are like 4 or 5. But the most reliable one, I would still say, is Navigator. So we're going to be using Navigator for this demonstration. And you can read more about this in the tutorial about the different choices and trade-offs and stuff like that. So first, structuring your application, right? This is a big thing. So this is the structure I recommend. So I'm just going to create a directory application. I'm going to cd into there, and I'm going to make a components directory, and that's where we're going to keep our components and styles, because we're going to use some styles. And then in the components, I'm going to make a dashboard, and these are just JavaScript files. And I'm going to make a landing component. So I have those 2. And then in styles, I'm going to have an index, and I'm going to have colors, because we want it to look nice. Cool. And then in the tutorial, I have a gist for the styles, for the colors, and for fixtures as well. So I'm just going to copy that stuff over. I have that in the parent directory, so I wouldn't have to use the gist. But let's see. I'm going to colors to simply simplification style. I'm going to copy the styles.js. Cool. And then, is that it? So that's index and colors, great. So now if I open up Atom and I go here, I have this, cool, so you see colors. This is just for like having kind of uniform color scheme. You want to have like a colors object so you can reference for your app. And this is all courtesy of Nick. He kind of provided all the design. And then make this big. So in styles, you guys can check this out later. I made a kind of a universal style sheet for the entire app in the tutorial so that you could just jump into the code. And so that's what this is. So I have styles for like each view, like the profile view. And styles in React Native is just an object. So you like styles.h1 gives you these styles. And it should look familiar. It should look kind of like how you use CSS, except that instead of using hyphens, it's using camel case JavaScript. So that's basically it. And React Native has kind of almost all of, I shouldn't say almost all, but a lot of the CSS stuff that you would normally use, but it does rely heavily on Flexbox. And Flexbox is kind of a very cool way of styling applications that's like very responsive. So you guys haven't checked out Flexbox, you can use it on the web as well. It's very cool. So that's when you see like Flex 1 and justify content and align items. Don't worry if it's confusing now. if when you start building React Native apps, you'll come to love using that kind of stuff. So that's what that stuff is. Cool. So we have that, and here it says, okay, we want to use some third-party libraries. We want to use icons, so we can use kind of like nice icon fonts, and we want to use a nav bar, so we can have a styled nav bar. So I'm gonna, instead of npm install, I'm gonna use yarn. I have to go into, so yarn add React Native icons, React Native navbar. Let's see how fast it is. Tell me if it's faster. Sometimes you can't really tell the difference. But what I've noticed is for like large applications, it does speed it up. So cool, we've installed that. Oh, but there's a caveat. Vector icons uses a special type of font. So previously there was this package rnpm, you would use that, and it would install the fonts into Xcode. It's a complicated thing. That's been made part of React Native, so we can just do React Native link, and it should take care of that for us. And let's see.
And what does React Native link do?
Yeah, so previously rnpm was another command line tool you'd use, and you'd say link the vector icons library to Xcode. And what it would do, it actually says here what it just did, linking the vector icons, Android dependencies, the iOS dependencies. And it's mainly because fonts, you can't import fonts as a JavaScript library, right? It has to be installed into Xcode. So that just takes care of that for you.
Gotcha.
And if you're using, this is not for all React Native libraries, but some of them will require you to do that. Yeah. So you just go to the GitHub page of the library that you're interested in using, and it will tell you how they want you to set it up. One caveat to that is that it won't work if I run it now. It'll throw an error. Let's see if it throws. When I try to use that, it'll throw an error. To get it to work, you actually have to restart Xcode, and then it should work. So it has to recompile those fonts. I know it's, but this, trust me, this is good that you know this now, because like not knowing these things can take a lot of time figuring out. Cool. So we did that. We have our libraries, and now we're ready to start writing to some custom components. So let's open up landing. So we're first going to write our first component. I have some snippets. Yeah, look at that. Very fancy, right? So I'm just importing the libraries that we install. So React Native vector icons, you can use material icons, font awesome, ion icons is what we decided to use. It's really whatever you like. So this is the colors object that we made. So I want to be able to reference that. And then from my styles, I want to get like the basic global styles. So that's like everything I need. This is a little trick I made there. So this is our landing. As I said, export default just means that this is the main thing that is referenced here. And this actually can be a little bit more readable. So render is whatever you return in render is what's going to be shown on the screen. So this is just going to be a simple landing page here. You have a view. This is my, let me set the title. And I also have to create a function. So the way that React works, these are your methods for, the component. And in this method, I'm saying, go to the next scene. Navigator, push, and go to the dashboard component. But for me to be able to reference this in the actual UI as on press, visit the dashboard, I have to add it in the constructor. And constructor is just like your, I don't know how you describe it's the kind of core attributes that it has. And you have to say super first, so like you're saying that it's inheriting from the React component, and then you can say this visit dashboard equals this visit dashboard, find this. And this is kind of a confusing thing that you shouldn't really worry about, but basically there's a reason why you do that. Because if you reference visit dashboard in the UI, it doesn't necessarily continue the same this. So it's just kind of a thing that you get used to. And you can see it, if you could do it like this, but people recommend to do it in the constructor itself. So I'm sorry if that's confusing. But yeah, this should work. Let's just go over what we did. So we imported these UI elements that we use for the mobile UI, a view, which is just kind of your div tag in HTML, text, which is any kind of text. Touchable opacity is like a button, right? So as you press it, the opacity changes. And we want to use an icon because we want like a person icon. The navigation bar is going to be the thing at the top where it says the title and everything. And we're using our styles and our colors. And that's basically what we have here, right?
How does it know
No.
what the dashboard is in the name?
Right, it doesn't yet. So we're gonna add that in. This is expecting that there's been a component named dashboard that we've already identified. So we'll do that after. So we will get to that. Okay, so I have that. Now we want to render. It. I just have to go to my entry file. Remember this? This is what's like actually rendering on the page, and I have to replace whatever's being returned with my new component, and then it should render. I do have to import this component, so I'm just going to put that up here. And I think that will work. Could be wrong. Wow, see, it worked. Cool. So yeah, just like I described, in the entry file, we're saying, no matter what, just return this landing, right? And the landing has the navigation bar. Below, the navigation has a title, landing, tint color, white. You see that I've set the color of the navigation bar to our primary color, blue. And then, I have some styles for the text. Define it as H2 style. And then some text in the button, which says go to the dashboard.
So if we press that, we should see a change in the opacity.
Yeah. See that?
Oh.
Yeah. Now so that's the cool thing, like with the responsiveness of it, like touch is pretty cool. It's not triggering the event because I'm like dragging away, and of course I'm not using the actual device right now, but what do you guys think will happen if I like click this button? Anyone? What do you think it will do?
Fire off this visit dashboard.
Yeah, and then what? It's gonna break. Let's break it. It broke, right? So at least what it does here, when you break it, it's going to give you a good error message that you can kind of debug. Undefined is not an object, which is kind of a vague error, but evaluating this props navigator push. So the way React works is that each component can have an internal state, but it can also receive properties from parent components. So that's what props is. But it's saying that this props navigator doesn't exist. I never passed any navigator to that component, so it's undefined. So it definitely doesn't have a method push, right? So at there, it's saying, hey, hold on, you can't go any further. So what do we need to do? We need to actually add our navigation now. So this is where we add the navigator. We can add that in the main component. By the way, how are you guys doing? Am I putting you guys to sleep so far? Or everyone okay? All right. If you have questions, just raise your hand and we can stop. I don't want to like just drive through everything. So navigator, basically when I'm importing like this from React Native, there are dozens of APIs and UI elements in React Native. We only import the ones that we need. And if you go to Facebook's documentation, you'll see documentation for each one of these things. So we've imported Navigator, and I think I also have to import my global styles. Okay. And instead of rendering the landing page, I'm going to render the navigator, because that's going to be my top level component. It's going to say, hey, when you get this this route, render this component. If you get this route, render this component. So it acts essentially as like an if-else kind of thing. If the route is landing, render the landing. If the route is dashboard, render the dashboard. Okay, so that's the component. So style. So the two properties we're mainly concerned with: initial route, which self-explanatory. It's going to be the name of the route that you want the app to start with, and then render scene, which is your if-else statement essentially. So it takes a route and it takes the navigator itself, and instead of if-else, you could use if-else, but we use switch, which is kind of just a fancier way of doing if-else. So if the route name is landing, then we're going to return our landing component. And we want to pass the navigator, remember, so that we can route to other components. Right? I'm just going to add in, what if the route name is dashboard? Then we're going to render the dashboard. And to make that work, we have to go in and dashboard. The dashboard is literally the same thing as the landing page, except it has a back button. So nothing really fancy there, but I have to define it so that this works. Yeah, I'll go over that in a bit. So yeah, this should work. According what my expectation is, I've set the initial route landing. I've passed landing the navigator. Yes.
Sorry,
Yep.
you lost me. Where's the back button on this? Because you just copied it over.
Yeah. Sure, I can. Yeah. So back button. It's just is a button.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I'm using one of the icons, just the icon for the back symbol. Yeah. But yeah, I'll go back to that. I just want to show the navigation should work. Let's see what happens. Okay, I'm at the landing page, just like I expected. Now I think that if I hit that button, it should take me to a new screen, right? You guys all agree? Uh-oh. What happened? I forgot to import the dashboard. So let me do that. All right, now will it work? Landing page, right? Oh, why did it show that? Go to the dashboard. Nice. See, we have routing now. Now, pass that navigator to any component and you can go back The back button is just gonna push me back to the original one. You can kind of go anywhere from there, right? Yeah, and the animation is also very customizable. Like this is kind of like the out of the box animation for transitioning between scenes, but you can like slide from bottom to up. You can, you know, any kind of one that you could think of, you can customize the animation.
I was gonna
Yep.
say, so you specified that it was gonna swipe this way or that way.
I didn't specify anything. It's just how that navigator component, this is the default. If you wanted to customize it, there are, in the documentation, you'll see different examples. I think instead of render scene, there's like, I think it's like scene transition or something, and you can specify which one you want. They have like 10 or 12 different options that you can choose from. Yeah, it's pretty customizable. Any other questions so far? How are we doing? Good? All right, so that's like, you know, that's kind of a proof of concept, right? You can make a lot of very, very simple apps just with that alone, being able to style and have buttons and stuff like that. We're gonna take it a little bit further. Let's see. Okay, so I'm actually gonna add some images, and we're gonna make the landing page a little bit fancier. So I have an images folder here. I'm just gonna add it. I'm gonna have to make an assets folder. Oops. Application, the assets.
And Tom, just to bother you while you're doing that.
Yeah.
So far, you've been showing us the iOS 6 rendering of this, right? But this is, every time you compile, you're also compiling an Android app?
No, so separate. You can use the same code for Android, but the process of playing it on an app is a different compiling.
Okay.
Yeah. So if I was doing on Android, I'd probably use my own device, because the simulators for Android are kind of tricky to work with. But you would just plug in your device, you'd make sure that it's connected to the same IP, and then it will just upload a bundle to your Android app. Yeah.
How do you map like interface actions between the platforms? So one of the things that iOS gives you for free is when you swipe from left to right from the edge, it's the same as clicking the back button.
Right.
But on Android, usually that's like open the app drawer or the settings drawer for that particular application.
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation regarding like how, like cross-platform functionality is well and good, but like how much of UI you want to be cross-platform. You know, Android, you have kind of like the material guideline for styling Android apps, and iOS is obviously different. What you can do is, you notice how like even the entry files have different extensions. It's like index iOS.js, index Android.js. For components that you want differently, you just give them the same name with an iOS or an Android extension. And like so like, for example, this is really cool. So dashboard, import dashboard from application components dashboard. What if I wanted a different dashboard for iOS and Android? I could import it the same way, but I would name two files, dashboard.ios.js, dashboard.android.js, and React Native is just going to know to use which one depending on what platform you're on. So there are a lot of tips and tricks for like making it easy to do that, to use one repository for both platforms.
But you're essentially, I mean, for that specific example, you are making two different dashboards.
Yeah, I mean, a dashboard, you wouldn't, like, dashboard's a big thing. Like, I'm thinking, you know, like an alert or an activity indicator. And one thing is, like, there is a lot of movement in the community to building packages that respect the guidelines for both platforms, but using a single component for them. So, like, the alert, like, looks on Android like an Android alert looks like, whereas iOS, it looks like an iOS alert. So it's really just, it really depends on personal taste, like how like how far down that route you want to go and like how important it is. But I've seen people take both approaches. Like some people are just like, I just need it to be functional and look good. I don't really care if it looks exactly like material design. And then some people take that really seriously. So I've seen people do both. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. So, oh yeah, I was going to import images. Cool. So now I have, I should have an assets folder with images, and I have a logo, and I have a welcome image. And so I'm just gonna kind of like make this a little fancier for my landing page. Let's see. I'm just gonna copy that. Some of this stuff is the same. So there's two ways of doing images. One, like just on the web, you can have a source kind of be your URL. You can have an image as a URL, or you can have it referenced locally. I'll show you both ways. Let's see, so I have to. So this is like the URL way of, I have it's hosted on S3, Amazon S3, and I can reference it. And I'm also going to reference specific styles for this component. I also have to, since I'm using an image, I have to actually bring in the React Native image component. And I'm assuming that this will work. And I'll come back to the components so you can get a better look at it. Yeah, so there, oh, it looks so nice now, right? I'm using the same components as before. It's just, you add a little bit of style, and like you still get that nice button kind of feel. Just looks and feels pretty nice. I didn't do anything really crazy. I kept I got rid of the navigation bar because for this scene I want it to be full screen. I have some styles to make this a background image, and you just specify a source. This is how this would be a URL. This right here. And I have the logo as well in the center. These are all text. This is a touchable opacity just with some style. So previously it was unstyled. Now I can say I want some padding. I want it to be full width. I want this to be the the color. This is all Nick. He really made things look nice. So that's that. For images, you can also reference them locally. So instead of this object here, background image, I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah, so you can just do a require statement. And that would just be the relative path to that image. And here I have the image saved, so that would render there. The top, oh, that's not the background image. That's wrong. That goes here. So that goes there, and then this would be welcome. And it will just load like a lot faster. If you have it stored locally, it's just less work for it to load it. If you're referencing it through URL, there's going to be a little lag between when it shows up. So that's the start of the app. The last thing we do as part of this session, we're going to add some like tab bar navigation. Are you guys cool with that? Yeah. I don't really feel the need to do this. It's just some refactoring thing. So yeah, let me show you what it would look like with the tabs. And just for the sake of time, I'm gonna just copy this over and show you guys. at me, but it should be fine. Oh. That was that one guy. Okay. That's there. Yeah. So that should be fine. Let's see. So yeah, tab bar navigation is pretty easy. It comes in React Native, tab bar iOS. There is a cross-platform version you can use as well. That's a third-party library, but for now we're using this. And then you just have however many tabs you want. Each tab should have a view. So I'm going to define these 3 views: an activity view, a message view, and a profile view. Remember, this is like a meetup clone. And then, like I said, this state, the selected tab, it's going to start with activity. Once I press each one of the tabs, it's going to change the view. So icon tab or item iOS is just like so I can have my custom icons as in the tabs. And so activity, this matches with, so this state selected tab equals activity. That means if the state is activity, that's going to be selected. That's the view that's going to render. And nested as a child is going to be that view, whatever component I'm going to render. And same thing with messages, profile. And the only thing missing, I think, is that I'm going to have to define these files. So let me go in components, and I'm going to want make messages, profile, activity, and then oops. Okay. And then cool. So I have those files now, and I'm just gonna do like when you're like getting started, you just want to like make it as simple as possible. Make sure that the routing is working. Just put like anything, just some text to get it started. So that's what I'm gonna do. This is just like it just says literally this is the activity view, and this is very similar to that the initial thing that we made for the when we were testing out the landing and the dashboard. Essentially the same thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do the same thing for the messages view. And I'm going to do the same thing for the profile view. Cool. So my hypothesis is that this should work. Of course, anything can go wrong. But let's see. See, it works. So, like I said, I'm able to like go back and forth. You have a basic tab view. You can render stuff like that easily. Guess I'm gonna leave it like that. I thought I'd get a little bit further, but we're a little late on time. There's some kind of like just using fake data to make a profile view. I'm using Ipsum for like messages, just to like make it fun. And I talk a little bit about, so this is what the message view looks like. This is what the activity view will look like. If you guys go through the tutorial, you can make all that. But a big part of the learning process in the tutorial is don't start with like building an API and like what your data scheme is going to be like. Just put fake data in, figure out what your app is going to look like before getting into that. And so that's something that I personally believe in. I think it's also an easier way to teach. So the way the tutorial is structured is that you're building out kind of the UI elements with fake data. You know, so you have like, this is a fake event, you have a fake user, you have fake messages and other users. And then, you know, once you have your app kind of like, you figured out like, yeah, this is what I want my users to do, then you build your database and your API. And so that's kind of what the tutorial does. Build out the UI, and then we build a Mongo and Node API using a service called Deployed. It's very cool, very easy to use. And then, you know, we wire everything together with API calls and fleshing out the data. We add, you know, like messaging, creating events, creating groups, having a calendar to store events, RSVPing, kind of like slide, what do you call it, like swipe to RSVP, that kind of stuff. And we also talk about deploying to the App Store, Google Play Store. One other thing that I forgot to mention, like there's a big trend in the React community, React Native community, to use Redux. How many guys of you have heard of Redux? Yeah. How many of you are like, I hate Redux? Anyone? You guys are like, I love Redux, it's awesome?
Heard of it, not used it.
Yeah, so I love Redux. I think it's awesome, but the problem with Redux is like it has gotten to the point, and it's kind of getting away from this, but like it came to the point where like you can't use React unless you're using Redux. And I think that's like that's just wrong. Like it really depends on what the needs of the thing that you're gonna make. So for those that don't know, Redux, we talked about like you have state within a React component. Redux takes the same idea but makes it like a giant state for any component that can connect to. And it's a great idea, but I felt like when we were building the tutorial, I wanted people to actually understand what React Native is specifically, how to use it, how to use the different API and elements before kind of like mixing in Redux along with that, because I don't know about for you guys, yeah.
Do you have like a mental checklist of whether or not that you're going to make needs Redux?
It's a level of complexity for me. Like if your app is like just 2 or 3 views, then you don't really need Redux, I think. Dan might disagree with me there. But
You want to answer?
not yet. I think it really depends. Dan Abramov, the creator of Redux, has even said like you don't always need Redux. So like that's the person that started it and is credited with it. I think for like learning React and React Native, it's good to like, and I think this is actually one of the things I learned from DBC was like feel the pain before you look for a solution. So like if you're building a React application for the web or a React Native app, and you start to say like, man, I wish there was a global state that I could access at any time, or I could log all the changes to my state, and you've been there and you understand the significance of that, then it could be definitely be a good solution. So there are a lot of really great business cases for using Redux, but for learning, if you're coming like fresh off and just learning React Native, I wouldn't recommend starting with it. Yeah.
The other thing that I keep hearing about with React Native that I haven't used is Flow. What is Flow, and like, does it fit in with React Native? How does it relate to Redux?
Yeah, so Flow is, so JavaScript, like among programming languages, right, there's like typed languages and then JavaScript, which is like a scripting language. So like JavaScript, you can write a function, who knows what's in it? You don't know like if it's a string, it's an int, it's an array, it's an object, you don't really know. You have no way of enforcing that. So Flow is a way of enforcing types. I haven't actually used it personally. I'm very curious about it. Dan, do you have anything to say about Flow?
Yeah,
I know you.
I use it only on all the new projects. When you have errors in one time, which you cannot know what's going on. For example,
Would you come up here?
Sorry about that. So I'm using Flow right now to my React Native apps and my React apps for all of them. Because if you don't use Flow, you can, as Tom just mentioned, that you can create an app and you're passing in arguments, but that you don't know if you're passing in an array and you're expected to receive a string. There's no way you detect that when you're writing your code, as if you have a type language, you can do that. So you can have situation in runtime that sometimes you have an error and sometimes you don't have an error. So if you introduce flow, that will prevent you to have that situation. It'll check if the receiving component getting what the sending component are sending. So that matching those two components, say, hey, I'm expecting to get this, but you're not sending me this. And you do that during your programming. So you will not have these funny errors. It's really hard to detect and debug. So that's why I'm using Flow. However, I would say that if you're new to React and you're new to React Native, do not start with Flow and do not start with docs. Both of those two are hard to learn. The learning curve is hard for Flow because the syntax is not always intuitive. So if you're starting learning JavaScript, you're going from ES5 to ES6, stick to that, make a basic app, get to understand the environment you're in, learn the ecosystem, and then go from there. I didn't use Flow for my first 3 apps, and they're still working. So it can be done, but as everybody like to grow, as they're learning to program, I'll definitely look into it as it goes on. So
Yeah. No, I mean, there's such a broad range of use cases for building mobile apps, from like, I just want to do this on the weekend for like a hackathon, you know, to like American Express, you know, like when you have a lot of money and a lot of stuff on the line. And I think, especially as you get into, you know, projects where there's more on the line, then you start to be a lot more concerned, you know, like how can we have reliability for the data types that are being passed, and that's Flow, linting, you know, and then, you know, of course, like testing and stuff like that as well. But for all my projects, honestly, I've never used Flow. I do use Redux, but I haven't used Redux for all the apps that I push to the App Store. So the first Bugaway Gita app we pushed did not use Redux. So it really depends. Yeah? Any question? Good question?
I was just gonna say about Flow, I would, in my opinion, if you start using like Flow and more stuff, maybe even investigate like TypeScript or something like that. It's built in.
Right.
But yeah, like JavaScript, like something like that. Very little like argument.
But yeah, a lot of people are using TypeScript. At Google, I believe they're using like TypeScript.
Yeah, for like Angular 2.
Yeah. So good things to know. But we were just having this conversation earlier where it's like there's always stuff to learn. So you kind of have to pick and choose where you want to invest your time. But yeah, I think React Native, I don't want to say like React Native is the future, but it's kind of how I feel. I've been really involved in the community. I've seen some big companies that, you know, have a lot on the line, take a really good look at it, and decide that it's worth investing in. And for me, that's not what did it. I just think it's a fun, and honestly, like when I was at DBC, there was no React in the curriculum. I was kind of curious as to like what different JavaScript frameworks are out there, and I think React is just very intuitive, it's very easy to use, and it's fun, and like developing should be fun. And like I think there's nothing more fun than like building a mobile app and showing it to your friends, right? So yeah, that's kind of my perspective.
So, Tom, if you are completely new to React and JavaScript or semi-new, what would you be advised to starting on this? What should I look for?
I would get a subscription to Egghead.io. There's a lot of good resources. Some of them you have to pay money for, and I would say the good ones that you pay money for, it's worth it, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's not not that great or can kind of lead you in circles a little bit. And I've been really happy with the videos on Ed.io for learning React Router. There's a lot of stuff out there. And then of course, you know, looking at the docs, I mean, that's like of course everyone is going to say that. And React docs are pretty friendly. There's like, but like for me now, I'm learning, I'm trying to learn GraphQL, which is another new technology. And it's like, yeah, I'm looking at the docs, but the docs aren't enough for me to like really understand how it works and get it. I need to do it. So I'm looking at other tutorials and sample projects, and I think like there's nothing better than doing it. So like whatever you're like, whatever website you're looking at or tutorial, like do it. And that's the best way. That's what I think. Yeah. Anyone have any other questions? Like I said, we have a meetup, React Native NYC. We have a Slack channel, reactnativenyc.slack.com. We have meetups like every other month. We also have office hours. One of our organizers, Allison, is having the office hours at Workbench, which is in Union Square. It's a nice space. I'm on Twitter, Tom Goldenberg, on Medium. My email, thomas.a.goldenberg@gmail. Like, I absolutely love this space. You know, this is where I became a developer. So I'm always willing to, like, they either want help or they want to talk about what it's like after boot camp and stuff like that. I'm always willing to have that conversation. Yeah. Anyone else have anything? Yeah? All right. Thank you guys. Thank you.